They thought I'd take it because I had no choice. I was in the middle of refactoring some god-awful legacy code, stuff written before Git was even a thing, when the email hit. I remember it because I'd just commented, "What kind of sadist nest ternaries 4 levels deep?" When my Outlook pinged. The subject was Comp Plan Q4, confidential. It was from Garrett, the CEO, meant for HR. But someone must have fat-fingered a CC because it hit every inbox on the dev team. The whole office went silent. The message wasn't long, maybe 6 lines, but it lit the place on fire. Keep him at 14 HR through Q4. He's got no leverage, divorced, community college grad, his kids got medical stuff, classic desperate dad syndrome. It was about me, Lucas Rivera, 34 years old, based in Tempe, Arizona. I'd rebuilt half of the damn client platform, was still rebuilding it, actually, and they were billing clients $250 an hour for my work. But, to Garrett, I was just a cost center with a sob story. Jesus, someone muttered behind me. The CEO's door slammed shut 2 seconds later. A recall request hit our inboxes at the same time. Too late. I didn't blink, didn't even move. I just stared at my monitor while the screen started to blur. You ever have that moment where the world stops just long enough for you to realize exactly what you are to some people? That was mine. Cheap labor. In a suit spreadsheet, a line item, an afterthought. No one said a word to me. Not the PMs, not the devs, not even Layla, who I shared a whiteboard with, and who once bought me coffee every day for a week when my kid was in the hospital. She looked at me with her mouth slightly open and didn't say a thing. I think they were waiting for me to explode, or cry, or storm into Garrett's office and flip a chair. But I didn't do any of that. I just minimized the email, pushed my glasses up the bridge of my nose, and kept working. The bastard wasn't wrong. I was divorced. My kid did have medical issues, and yeah, I did need the job. But what he didn't know, I'd already started building something better, in secret, at night. After Ethan went to bed. After the fear of not making rent started to morph into something else entirely. Determination. They thought I'd take it because I had no choice. They were wrong. When I first started at Virex Systems, I had nothing but a busted Corolla, a backpack full of cables, and a 5-year-old son who couldn't sleep through the night without wheezing. Ethan's asthma meds cost more than my rent, and I was still trying to adjust to the hollow quiet of post-divorce life. I was raw, broke, and barely hanging on when Garrett interviewed me. He looked me up and down like a used appliance. "We're taking a risk on you," he said, fingers steepled like he was the damn Pope. $14 an hour. Review in 6 months. Prove yourself. I said thank you. Not because it was generous, it wasn't, but because I needed it. I needed something. I had no savings, no family nearby, and no backup plan if this didn't work. So, I said thank you, shook his hand, and tried not to flinch when he told me my workstation was just past the break room next to the closet. The janitor closet, to be exact. My first desk wobbled if I leaned too hard on it. The monitor was yellowed around the edges, and the tower sounded like it was trying to take off. Booting up took 20 minutes. Outlook crashed every time I opened a file bigger than a JPEG, but I made it work. I stayed late the first night, and the next. I took home printed documentation like it was bedtime reading. Virex had internal tools that hadn't been touched since 2012, most of them written in frameworks no sane dev would touch. Their APIs were half broken, their back-end spaghetti, and their documentation a war crime. But underneath all that mess, there was opportunity. I figured out where things were breaking. I patched endpoints nobody else dared open. I patched. One of their client dashboards kept crashing under load. I rebuilt the entire module over a weekend and pushed a fix Monday morning. 2 weeks later, one of the project managers pulled me aside. "Hey," he said, almost embarrassed. "Is it true you fixed the Kern's dashboard?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" He blinked. "They've been complaining about that for like 2 years. Garrett told them it couldn't be solved without a full rebuild." Huh. After that, my name started getting around. Clients began asking for me on calls. I had no fancy title, no management power, but they started looping me into strategy meetings like I was part of the leadership team. Garrett even smiled at me once, real wide and fake as hell, and said, You're becoming indispensable. That smile disappeared when I brought up the 6-month raise. We were sitting in his glass office. He had a Rolex on, big, gold, loud, and he barely looked up from his phone when I asked. He muttered, "Market conditions," like it was a full sentence. "Let's revisit at the end of Q4. This was Q4, so no raise? Budgets are tight," he said, sipping from a coffee that probably cost more than my groceries. "You should be grateful we've kept you on full time." Grateful. That word stuck with me all the way back to my desk, past the fresh out of college devs making twice my rate, and the marketing guy who bragged about his quarterly bonus like it was a birthright. I was grateful, all right. Grateful I'd already started building something better. Late at night, after Ethan was asleep, I'd been tinkering with something on my old Frankenstein laptop, a back-end platform cleaner than anything Virex had. No duct tape, no legacy trash, something sleek, something that could replace their entire system with one install. I didn't even have a name for it yet, but the bones were there, and the more Garrett shrugged me off, the more time I poured into it. I kept showing up early, kept staying late, but something in me had started to shift. I wasn't building their future anymore. I was building mine. I called it Alloy. The name came to me around 2 in the morning, while I was elbow deep in Node.js and cold coffee. Something about fusing things that didn't quite belong together, like code and desperation, late nights and hope. Alloy sounded strong, clean, durable. Exactly what I needed it to be. I started building it at my kitchen table on a Frankenstein laptop. Part Dell, part salvage, all patched together like my life. The screen flickered if I nudged the power cord wrong and the L key stuck. But it worked. That's all that mattered. The idea was simple. Client management software that didn't suck. Not the bloated legacy junk Virex sold to banks and insurance firms. Not the kind that required 3 weeks of onboarding and 5 IT guys to reset a password. Alloy was meant to be fast, intuitive, flexible, something real people could use without a manual or a hotline. By the end of month 3, I had login, user permissions, and secure client data fields working clean. It didn't look pretty yet, but the bones were solid. That's when Shane got involved. Shane was a designer I used to work with at a startup that died mid-pivot. He'd just been laid off, had a daughter a year younger than Ethan, and was one of the few people I trusted enough to tell. We met up at a burger place halfway between our apartments, and I showed him the mock-ups on my busted laptop over soggy fries and milkshakes. "Dude," he said, eyes wide, "this makes Virex look like Windows 98 had a baby with a fax machine. I'm calling it Alloy." He leaned back, nodded. "I'm in." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. We worked nights, after bedtime routines and dishwasher cycles and bills paid just in time. Shane sent Figma files at midnight. I pushed code at 2 a.m. We passed ideas back and forth over greasy takeout containers, our kids asleep in the next room. And while Virex treated me like a disposable asset, I studied everything. Client contracts, pricing tiers, pain points, the way sales talked about feature sets they barely understood. I printed out invoices, read them like blueprints. I even checked my own contract, looking for landmines. They didn't even have a proper non-compete. It was buried in boilerplate HR language, just a generic NDA. No clause barring side work, no restrictions post-termination. I paid a lawyer $300 to double-check, and she looked up from the printout and said, "You're clear, just don't use any of their code." I smiled. I didn't need their code. What I was building made their product look like a dinosaur trying to use a touchscreen. Meanwhile, Garrett hired his idiot nephew. Tech consultant, they called him. $75 an hour. Kid showed up in Yeezys, posted selfies in the server room, and once asked if we could do the cloud in dark mode. I watched him crash a staging server trying to install a theme plugin on a back-end API. I was still making $14, so I kept pretending, nodded along in stand-ups, took tickets, fixed what I had to fix. But every night, I built Alloy a little further, added features, tested edge cases, made sure every table scaled right on mobile. Then, one day, I got pulled into a client call with Juno Capital, Virex's biggest whale. Their project manager had questions, real ones, about security and user roles. Garrett's nephew froze. We have, like, tiers? Silence. So I jumped in, walked them through how it could work. Clean, fast, permission-based. I even screen shared a dummy version I'd built for Alloy, hiding the name. The Juno rep raised an eyebrow. That's interesting. We don't have that now. No, I said, heart pounding. But we could. After the call, I stared at my screen and realized something. I wasn't hiding anymore. That was the shot. I just needed to take it. The whole thing was already circling the drain before I walked in. I was elbow deep in a bug no one else could reproduce when an IM from Layla popped up on Slack. Garrett's nephew is crashing the Juno demo. Get in here. I didn't even respond, just stood up, tucked my phone into my pocket, and walked toward the conference room like I wasn't about to put out a 5-alarm fire. Through the glass, I could already see the disaster. Frozen screen, blank stares, and Garrett pacing like a caged animal while his nephew clicked around helplessly. The kid mumbled. Sometimes the load balancer just takes a second to catch up. Helen Kershaw sat stone-faced at the end of the table, CEO of Juno Capital, billion-dollar portfolio. Black suit, no expression. Just watching. Taking it all in. Garrett spotted me and practically yanked me into the room. Lucas, can you just... He gestured at the screen. Fix this? I didn't answer him. I nodded at Helen, sat down in front of the laptop, and took over. The platform had timed out from an unresolved dependency and a circular API call loop. Sloppy. I killed the rogue thread, bypassed the faulty module, and ran a quick patch script I'd written months ago and quietly kept in my personal stash. The system booted, stable, clean. I walked them through the dashboard in real time, pointing out key metrics, smart filters, and a quick view tool I'd built that was never even in the spec. Helen leaned forward slightly when I showed her that. This isn't part of your current platform, she said. It should be, I replied. By the time the demo ended, Garrett was sweating through his collar, and his nephew looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I stood up, ready to leave, when Helen held out a card. Not a generic business card. Her personal one. Name, direct number, and a private Gmail address. I turned it over. Her cell number was handwritten on the back. She looked me straight in the eye. Call me. That night, after Ethan was finally asleep, his inhaler tucked under the pillow, like always, I stepped out onto the balcony, stared at the streetlights, and dialed. Helen answered on the first ring. Lucas Rivera, she said. Tell me your story. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her the truth. About Virex, about Garrett, about the closet desk and the missed raise, about the email, the one that said I had no leverage. She didn't interrupt, she just listened, and when I told her I was still making $14 an hour, the line went dead silent. 14, she said finally. They're billing us $250 for your time. I let out a quiet laugh. Yeah. More silence. Well, she said, that explains the disconnect. We didn't talk long after that, just enough for her to say she understood, that she'd be in touch. 2 days later, Garrett called me into his office. No smile this time. No small talk. He shut the door hard and didn't sit. Juno Capital wants you, he said, as their sole point of contact. Effective immediately. I didn't flinch. Okay. He paced, fuming. You're not senior level. You're not even salaried. I met his stare. Doesn't sound like they care. That night, I opened a shared doc titled Alloy Client Migration Plan. It was almost ready, and I already knew who our first customer would be. We signed the lease on the office above Tony's Pizza 2 weeks after the Juno demo. It was small, 2 rooms, bad lighting, and the AC sounded like a jet engine. But it was ours. Shane brought a mini fridge. I brought a coffee maker. We set up desks scavenged off Craigslist, and I slapped a cheap vinyl sign on the glass door. Alloy Systems, LLC, soon to be removed from the building directory, according to Tony. We were still in beta, still patching little quirks and edge case bugs. But it worked. It really worked. Fast, stable, and simple to use. And once Helen signed the verbal agreement for Juno Capital to migrate, I knew we were past the point of no return. I brought on 2 more devs, old friends from a contract job years ago. One had just been laid off. The other was sick of chasing invoices from flaky startups. They signed on immediately, working freelance until we could pay full time. At night, I ran performance tests until my eyes blurred. In the morning, I dropped Ethan off at school like nothing had changed. But something had. Every morning that I walked into Virex felt more and more like walking into a place I had already left. The day Alloy passed its final round of internal testing, I printed out my resignation letter at my kitchen table. No emotion, just 2 lines. Effective immediately, I resigned from Virex Systems. Lucas Rivera. I put it in my backpack and went into work like it was any other Tuesday. Garrett was in his office, barking at someone on Zoom about quarterly projections. I waited. Let the moment stretch. Then I knocked and stepped inside. He didn't even look up. "Let me guess," he said, waving his hand. "They poached you. Juno made an offer." I didn't smile. I just set the envelope on his desk. "No," I said. "I'm starting my own company." That got his attention. He leaned back in his chair and barked out a laugh like I'd told the best joke he'd heard all year. "With what money?" he snorted. "You know what it costs to build a platform, to scale, to support clients? You got, what, some freelance checks in a GoDaddy domain?" "Enough," I said. His smile faded. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You've got a kid, right? You don't want to gamble on pipe dreams when you've got medical bills?" I looked him in the eye. "Thanks for the concern, Garrett. But I stopped gambling the day I realized you were betting against me." He didn't say anything, just stared as I turned and walked out. Past the devs who looked up from their monitors and said nothing. Past the conference room where his nephew was, once again, trying to troubleshoot an error he didn't understand. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I thought that would be it. That I could finally put Virex behind me, focus on Alloy, and just move forward. I was wrong. The next morning, I tried logging into my Virex email to retrieve an old contact list. Locked out. I checked the dev repo for a couple of notes I'd left on the API documentation. Gone. Then my phone buzzed, HR notification, termination for cause, effective immediately. No explanation, just a PDF that said I'd violated company policy. My health insurance was canceled. My internal profiles were deleted. My access to company tools scrubbed clean like I'd never worked there. They were making it loud, making it dirty. Garrett wasn't going to let me walk out quietly. He wanted to bury me on the way out. I looked at the termination for cause notice and laughed. If he thought that was going to stop me, he really hadn't been paying attention. I got the text an hour after I was locked out of Virex. "Helen wants to see Alloy. Today. Can you come in?" No signature. Just a clean message from a Juno Capital assistant I didn't recognize. I replied, "On my way," and grabbed my laptop from the desk above the pizza shop, hands still shaking from the termination notice I'd read over cold coffee. Juno's HQ looked like something out of a design blog. Polished concrete floors, glass-walled conference rooms, abstract art that probably cost more than my entire childhood neighborhood. I was in a thrift store button-down and 3 hours of sleep, clutching a laptop covered in old "Python is my cardio" stickers. Helen didn't care. She just waved me in. "Show me what you got." I hooked up to the TV in the room, clicked a few keys, and launched Alloy. It loaded instantly. Clean UI, crisp dashboard. I walked her through user roles, access control, internal messaging, audit trails. The interface adjusted fluidly between devices. Response times were sub-second. "This is Alloy," I said quietly. The way client platforms should have worked 10 years ago. She didn't speak for a long moment, just stared at the screen. Then she leaned back, crossed her legs, and asked, "How soon can we switch?" I blinked. 2 weeks, we're ready." "Good," she said. "I'll have legal draft the contract. And Lucas?" "Yeah?" "I think it's about time Virex found out what a desperate dad can really do." That night, I went home and opened my laptop in the dark after Ethan fell asleep. I uploaded the final pricing doc, configured invoicing, and hit send. The contract with Juno Capital was official. Triple what I made in a year at Virex. No middlemen, no sales decks, just clean tech and earned trust. Then I backed up every document, every repo, every client note, proposal, code commit, and build log. I archived copies to multiple drives, saved screenshots, triple-checked timestamps. Garrett wasn't just mad. I knew by now he'd be dangerous. At 1:14 a.m., I got the message. Garrett's freaking out. Cleaning house. Watch your back. It was from Layla, one of the few people still at Virex with a conscience. 10 minutes later, Shane texted, "Just heard Garrett told clients you stole company tech." I stared at that for a long second, then opened Twitter. Searched my own name. Nothing. Yet. Garrett was testing the waters, probably whispering it in client calls, trying to poison the well before I could grow roots, trying to kill Alloy before it got traction. Too late, Juno had signed, the invoice was out. The migration team was booked. I knew what Garrett was thinking. Make me radioactive. Burn my name. Scare the clients. But what he didn't know, I had receipts. I had Slack messages. GitHub commits time-stamped months before his nephew wrote a single line of code, a lawyer already on retainer, and a client, Helen, who knew what I'd done in real time on a call she'd witnessed firsthand. He wanted a war? Fine. I'd show him how quiet a coup could be, one line of code at a time. The envelope showed up by courier. No return address, just a thick manila folder stamped urgent in red, and a name I hadn't spoken out loud in days. Garrett Westmore, CEO, Virex Systems, Inc. Inside was a cease and desist. 4 pages of corporate chest puffing, written like a bad breakup letter from a lawyer with too much gel in his hair. They claimed I'd stolen proprietary code. They claimed I breached confidentiality. They claimed Alloy was built using Virex resources, infrastructure, and trade secrets. My lawyer, a guy named Rami, who wore mismatched socks and billed like a shark, read through the whole thing in 5 minutes. Then he laughed. "This is trash," he said, flipping to the last page. "They don't have a non-compete in your original offer. No IP clause. No assignment of inventions. You're cleaner than their codebase." I exhaled, shoulders tight from a week of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. "Still," I said, "they're going to use this to scare people." "Oh, absolutely," he said. "Which is why we're not going to court." "We're not?" He leaned forward. "Nope. We're going to the press." A week later, a tech blog picked up the story. I didn't leak it. Someone did, though. Maybe a developer from inside Virex. Maybe Layla. I never asked. The headline made my stomach twist. Dev Dad builds better product after being underpaid for years. And right beneath it, in bold, internal email. Leak. Classic desperate dad syndrome. Yeah, that one. The blog embedded the original email, Garrett's words, verbatim. They quoted my hourly wage. They quoted his luxury watch. They listed Alloy's features side by side with Virex's. And even the comment section couldn't pretend not to see the difference. It went viral. LinkedIn.Twitter.HackerNews.Reddit. Even Facebook, where my aunt commented, "So proud of you, mijo," under a post about corporate abuse. And Garrett doubled down. He went on a startup podcast that no one cared about before and ranted for 20 minutes about how young developers today want CEO salaries after 3 commits, and how no one wants to earn their stripes anymore. He said Alloy was an immature clone, and that I was lucky to have worked under leadership like Virex. By the end of the week, 2 of Virex's sponsors had pulled out. Helen forwarded me an email from Juno Capital's procurement office. "Please ensure all future correspondence is directed through Lucas Rivera and his team at Alloy. Virex Systems is no longer under consideration." I got 2 more contracts in my inbox that same day. One from a fintech firm in Chicago, one from a logistics company out of Atlanta. Shane called me later that night. "We're not even trying to market this thing yet," he said, laughing. "It's all inbound." All I could do was nod. It wasn't just about the product anymore. It was about the story. I was the underdog, the desperate dad who didn't quit, who built something better in the dark while everyone else cashed in on his work. And for once, people weren't just watching. They were rooting for me. That's when the emails started, not from clients, from venture capital firms. "We saw the Alloy story. Let's talk funding. Your growth is impressive. We'd love to schedule a meeting." One of them was from a firm that had backed half of Silicon Valley. I forwarded that one to Rami and texted him, "Ready?" He replied 2 words, "Let's build." They flew us out to San Francisco on a Thursday. Shane and I sat in a glass-walled conference room 27 floors above Market Street, watching a bunch of venture capitalists in muted hoodies and designer sneakers flip through our deck. Helen was the one who got us in the door, said we were worth the meeting, said to show up, be honest, and let the product speak. So we did. I walked them through Alloy from top to bottom, not a slideshow, a live demo, real data, real-time updates. I showed them the security features, the load speeds, the user experience stripped down to its simplest, smartest form. Shane brought mock-ups for the next version, cleaner still. When I was done, one of the partners, a guy who used to run infrastructure for a company everyone's grandma uses now, leaned back and said, "So, what do you need to scale?" I didn't hesitate. We need infrastructure, talent, sales support. But more than that, we need time. I don't want to blow this up fast and lose the soul of it. He nodded. You want to build slow and right. Exactly, I said. But we can't do it on fumes. Right then, the door opened. 2 reps from Juno Capital stepped in, unannounced. They were in town for another meeting, but Helen must have sent them. They sat down, asked to see the demo again. This time, when they watched it, they nodded, smiled. At the end, one of them turned to the partners. We're switching to Alloy next week. You're not just investing in an idea. You're investing in a platform we already trust. 2 hours later, the offer came in. Seed funding, enough to cover 2 years of burn. Generous terms, and most importantly, I'd retain majority ownership. They weren't looking to run us. They wanted to help us run farther. That afternoon, while I was still coming down from the high, my phone buzzed with a 415 number I didn't recognize. I stepped into the hallway and answered. It was Garrett. I didn't say anything at first, just let him talk. He tried to sound calm, like a guy making a professional courtesy call. Said he heard rumors we'd taken on investors. Said he wanted to make sure the legal side of things was still clean. Then he threatened to sue the VC firm directly if they backed us. I didn't respond. Apparently, neither did they. Later that evening, I got a one-line email from the partner. Garrett called. We laughed, then we hung up. And that was the final crack. The next morning, Helen forwarded me something from her contacts at Virex's board. Garrett had been suspended, pending review. They'd seen the press, the lawsuit backfiring, the contracts vanishing. They knew he was hemorrhaging credibility and money. And then, a second message from the board. Would Alloy be open to a conversation, to settle? I stared at the screen, reread it twice. After everything, Garrett's own board had cut him loose, and now they were knocking on my door. We settled on a Tuesday morning. I sat across from their legal team in a downtown conference room that smelled like old carpet and cold coffee. Their new interim CEO, a woman named Cynthia, who looked like she hadn't slept in days, slid the agreement across the table. They were done fighting. No NDA, no backhanded clauses, just a clean surrender. The lawsuit dropped, a public apology issued, and a damages payment that came close to what they would have paid me had I actually been compensated fairly for the last 4 years. But I added one more condition. I want a full audit of all salaries at Virex, I said, and I want back pay for anyone making below market rate, especially engineers, especially the junior ones. Cynthia blinked. That's not standard. I'm not standard, I said, and neither was the way you ran things. She looked at the rest of her team. No one spoke, then she nodded. We'll do it. And just like that, it was over. That week, I moved Ethan into a new place. 2 bedrooms, real backyard, walking distance to his school. He picked the room with the built-in shelves and immediately filled them with his Lego sets and asthma meds. He didn't say much, but the way he looked around the first night and whispered, "Is this ours?" told me everything. At Alloy, we expanded. Hired 10 more people, most of them former Virex devs who had quietly reached out when the dust started settling. I brought Layla on as project lead. The first thing she said in our kickoff meeting was, "You know this is insane, right?" I nodded. "Yep, let's build anyway." We weren't just hiring warm bodies. We were building a team that had been overlooked, underpaid, and told to wait their turn. I wasn't going to make them wait anymore. Everyone made a living wage. Bonuses were tied to delivery, not bud and seat hours. No timesheets, no dress code, just results. The first onboarding session ended with Shane standing in front of the group and saying, If Garrett ever walks in here, we're calling security. Everyone laughed, but no one really thought he would, because Garrett had vanished. No press releases, no rebound startup, just radio silence. I heard later that the Virex board had scrubbed his name from every page of the company's site. His nephew was quietly let go, with a vague note about restructuring. And Alloy was everywhere. Helen called a month later to say they were rolling us out company-wide. "You're the new standard," she said. "People are noticing." I didn't answer right away. I just looked around our office. Laptops open, coffee brewing, engineers in hoodies solving real problems. Shane was hunched over a whiteboard. Layla was on a client call, laughing. It hit me right then. I wasn't part of someone else's dream anymore. I was running my own. And for the first time, I didn't have to justify my value. I had already proven it, in code, in contracts, and in the team around me. Garrett thought he'd break me. All he did was give me the reason to build something no one could take away. 6 months later, Alloy had 22 active clients and a wait list. We'd moved out of the tiny pizza joint office into a full floor downtown. Exposed brick, open layout, and a real espresso machine someone's cousin donated. It still smelled faintly like pepperoni, but it was home. The team had grown to 20 people, engineers, designers, support, no egos, no titles on the door, just people who'd been underestimated one too many times. I came in early most mornings, same hoodie, same routine, brew coffee, check logs, write a little code before meetings. Shane had a corner desk by the window. Layla ran operations with the kind of precision that made me wonder how Virex ever functioned without her. We even hired an intern, first-generation college kid who reminded me of me. We didn't just build software, we built trust. Our clients weren't just names in a CRM. They were people we talked to, listened to, learned from. Every feature we released solved a real pain point. Every update came with patch notes written like a human being wrote them. Our motto was simple: build better, treat people better. Alloy worked because we did. And then one afternoon, I was finishing up a bug report when I heard small feet sprinting down the hallway. "Dad!" Ethan barreled into the office, backpack bouncing, inhaler clipped to the side. He looked around, wide-eyed. People waved. Shane handed him a juice box. Ethan wandered between desks, peeking at screens and asking questions. He stopped next to me and whispered, "You made all this?" I nodded. "Yeah, I did." He stood there for a second, looking at the room, the whiteboards, the soft hum of servers. "It's kinda cool," he said. I laughed. "Just kinda?" He grinned. "Okay, fine, really cool." And just like that, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about Garrett or Virex or the years I spent trying to prove I was worth more than a spreadsheet entry. He was gone, forgotten, replaced by something stronger, something that couldn't be erased with a memo or a locked account. Alloy was proof that you can start with nothing but an old laptop and a reason. The truth is, Garrett made one mistake that changed everything. He thought I wouldn't fight back. He saw a desperate dad with a sick kid and assumed I'd keep my head down forever. What he didn't see was what that desperation could become when it's focused, channeled, and sharpened. When the world tells you you're replaceable, you build something they can't replicate, not just a product, a company, a mission, a future. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a court ruling or a headline. Sometimes it's a working product, delivered on time, under budget, and better than they ever thought possible. Sometimes it's watching your kid walk through the office you built from nothing and knowing he'll never have to wonder if you fought hard enough. Because you did. I did.